Hey, this is Ryan Steele, and you're listening to the Give and Go podcast.
Hey, welcome back to the Give and Go basketball podcast. Host Mitch Shreve, along with my two basketball gurus, Ryan Steele, Ben Sperry. We do have another special guest today, but we're going to wait on that one for a second. Make sure that you are following us on Instagram, Twitter, like us on Facebook. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you're liking what we're saying. And then, I don't know if you noticed this, but we do have some new logos out this week. So we want to give a shout out to last week's guest, Steve Lucas, for hooking us up with those. So, gentlemen, how are we doing this week?
Every week's a good week when there's basketball in it.
Yeah, Ben and Ryan, that's directed at you because our special guest is actually going to have a lot of time to talk today because this show's about him. So we have with us actually probably our most popular commenter and biggest follower right now in the moment is Tim Peoples. Tim, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So we kind of got a lot of slack because last week we had a lot of North Carolina blue on the show last week. So we decided to get some Duke in, some deeper blue blood going on in here this week. So Tim, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, give us your basketball background, anything you have for us.
Well, first, I want to say thank you guys for having me. You guys do a great job on the show. Other than the fact that two of you are Carolina fans, it's a pretty perfect show. So I want to thank you for having me. I was born and raised in a small town called Seaboard, North Carolina. Pretty sure nobody knows where that is. I was more of a street ball player than actual organized basketball player, but, I love the street game. So I grew up small town, North Carolina. I went to North Carolina Central, which, believe it or not, is right in between UNC and Duke. So we spent a lot of time on both campuses. So fun fact, the Carolina players spent more time on our campus than they did their own. So, and I've been playing basketball all my life. It's my first love. I got better as I got older. So, and I played in a couple of church leagues. I don't know if that compares to you guys' high school success stories, but that's about the extent of my basketball.
No, low key though, Tim's a really good basketball player. We met playing basketball. I used to live in Alexandria, Virginia, in an apartment complex that had a half-court indoor court, and I would go. This is right after. Actually, I don't remember. I think we might have met when I was still in law school. So I used to go get shots up before I went to class. And one day I met this group of guys that was coming over from the Department of Defense building, which is real close by, on their lunch break, and they would get it in. And that's how we met.
And it was funny, right before we met Ben, we joked around that normally when you go to the court, you pick the tallest black guy first. So Ben had the first pick, then he picked me. So it was just funny that that was our conversation before we saw him. So,
well, we both learned things that day. You don't always judge the book by its cover, right?
Yeah, because we all were sad that Ben got the first pick because nobody wanted to play with him, but he was really good.
It worked out. And then we played a lot of basketball for a couple of years there, and then we actually became good friends. And it's been good since.
Yeah, he's going to be in my wedding coming up, so I appreciate that.
That's even cool. Congratulations, that's big time. So last week on the show, Ryan and I got a chance to go through and kind of pick out our favorite, or actually our favorite Duke players and our least favorite Duke players. So from a Duke perspective, give us your favorite North Carolina. Actually, let's start with the most hated North Carolina player. Give us your most hated North Carolina player of all time.
Okay, was it Ryan last week that said, as a grown-up, you can't really hate on a teenage kid?
Yeah, we can say that.
That was Ryan.
That
most
will stick with
disliked.
me forever. Yeah. So, piggybacking off that, I think my most disliked Carolina player would have to be either Sean May or Joseph Forte.
Ooh.
Those were the two. Because they gave us a lot of problems. Yeah.
That's Mitch's favorite player of all time
Yes.
for Carolina. Joseph
Also, I want to
Forte.
ask why, because this is interesting, because a lot of times the reason I think Duke players get hated and the ones that get picked to get hated for the most part are because like the fans that are a lot of times these white kids see somebody that looks kind of like them and they decide like that guy, right? Like so like what makes a hateable North Carolina player?
Well, the reason why I picked Sean May because I think he gave Sheldon Williams a 20,
20,
20 or
yeah.
20. He gave him a 20-20, and you know that's defensive player of the year. You don't be giving them those type of games. So
yeah, he gave him a 20-20 for sure.
Yeah, he gave him all sorts of problems, so that's why. And Joseph Forte, I don't know. I don't know. When I was in school, it's just something about the way he looked and all that, and he stole a couple girls from us, so you know.
That's really fun.
That's classic.
I figured a Tyler Hansbrough was coming for sure.
That's the name I wrote down on my paper.
No, it was people that were really good. I didn't personally not like Tyler Hansbrough, but yeah,
I know if
Joseph
I
Forte
was a
and
Duke
Sean
fan, I would have hated Tyler Hansbrough if I was a Duke fan.
You know, Tyler Hansbrough gets enough hate. We don't need to
Right.
keep throwing it around.
Psycho team. So
fair.
who's your favorite North Carolina player then?
Oh, that's easy. Marcus Page.
Yeah.
Marcus
Okay.
Page.
Yeah.
I love me some
Oh,
Marcus
that's right.
Page.
You know, you did make that comment the other day. That's
If
right.
I could cheer for one player, I was so upset that they won the championship after he left. Like I really wanted him to get one. So yeah, Marcus Page was my favorite. So
here's a fun stat that I heard Jay Billis talking about tonight during the game, which by the way, we're recording this and right out on Saturday night. So the Duke North Carolina game just got over about an hour ago. But so Jay Billis said that, and I did not know this, Garrison Brooks over his 4 years won defensive player of the game 37 times, I think it was. And the only North Carolina basketball player to win it more than him in recent years is Marcus Page. So I thought that was a pretty cool stat because you don't think of Marcus Page more. You think of more offensive side of the ball for him, I think. Personally, that's where my mind goes. But he was an excellent defensive player too and just a leader. But so anyways, the game ended up being not as debatable or not as fun to talk about. North Carolina ended up winning in a blowout 91-73. And it was kind of just North Carolina's ball game from the tip.
So allow me to ask you guys this. I mean, in light of just the way both team seasons have gone, is this just an in-between year for both programs or what's going on?
Yes.
Well,
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, so watching it and just having watched them throughout the year, this for sure is an in-between year for UNC because you see the young guys, you see the guys who this is the sort of team that if they all come back, they become a top 10 team going into next year. They're going to be a favorite to win the ACC if they come back. You know, they're going to lose Garrison Brooks. He's very important. Duke, on the other hand, you know, guys like they really miss Jalen Johnson tonight. I mean, him stepping out for the rest of the season, and that's his choice, obviously. That really hurt them. But then you don't know, like, is Matthew hurt? He could come back, but does he come back or does he leave? And guys like Goldwire who are older, and you know, to me, they don't have that freshman core that you could bring back and be super pumped about. To me, what they lack, and it's weird seeing the Duke team, they don't have the shooting that a normal Duke team has. I mean, Duke will always give up some size to North Carolina, and they'll give up some paint points, but they counteract that, which is amazing shooting. And it's when you don't have that coming back next year, I don't know if now it's another in-between year next year. So that's my thought.
I think another thing that we can say about the Duke team is that not only are they missing that, like Ben and I had this conversation, not all McDonald's All-Americans are created the same. Yeah, so yeah, they got a couple of McDonald's All-Americans, but they don't have any pros. I mean, we miss Jalen Johnson, and I'm glad all that noise canceled about are they better without him or something like that. Yeah. But I mean, they have a lot of good players, just not a lot of great players. Yeah. So other than maybe Matthew Hurt, I see the whole team having to return because they don't shoot it well. They get to the basket okay, and then they don't have the girth to bang with a Carolina. Because even when we normally get out rebounded, at least guys will get in there and get some sort of rebounds. But there was no resistance. So
no. And that was another thing that I noticed tonight too, and Jay Billis pointed out is Mark Williams had a great game tonight, but he just couldn't contain everybody by himself, and that's where he struggled. I'm looking here; he's actually their leading scorer at 18 points, but he only had 3 rebounds, and I think that was a huge difference maker because. Just North Carolina just dominated the glass. Final rebounds I have are 38 to 31, but it didn't seem that close.
And honestly, that's not bad. What hurt Duke in this specific game is if Carolina, who's not a good perimeter shooting team this year, when they come out and hit 4 of their first 7 threes,
good point.
You get anything from those guys.
Yeah.
Then it just becomes such a tougher fight when you got to deal with 4 monsters inside. They just put you in foul trouble. They all can run the break. It's just tough when now guards are hitting shots too. So
when Matthew Hurt looks hurt.
He
was wide open threes and all that, and he's had a bad game against them both games. So,
but anyways, one thing I do want to point out was it was good seeing Sterling Manley back on the floor. I don't know if you got to see that, Steele, but for a guy who's injury ridden as much as he's been in his career, but I think this is a good point too. We're going to go ahead and take our break. Tim's actually going to stick around with us, and we're going to go through some classic Duke, North Carolina games, and I think Tim will have a little bit more fun talking about some of these Duke victories in this.
More fun.
Hey, stick around. This is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Mitch Shreve, along with stars of the show, Ryan Steele, Ben Sperry, and then our special Duke fan guest. We have Tim Peoples with us today. We just got done recapping the Duke, North Carolina round 2 here this season. We talked about some of Tim's favorite North Carolina and least favorite North Carolina players. So now we're going to kind of get into different eras of Duke, North Carolina, and kind of set up this rivalry and why we wanted to highlight this game so much, especially since Steele and I are such huge Tar Heels fans. But we kind of mentioned it in the last break, but I have to start this just by saying that my favorite North Carolina player, and he was with us tonight, is Joe Forte, which actually happens to be Tim's least favorite player. So go ahead, Tim, and just give us some of your favorite Duke teams, Duke players.
Okay. I would have to say if we start with my favorite Duke team, it would have to be the 2009-2010 team. Because to me, that team won a championship and there wasn't any top NBA talents. I know Singler made it, but that team felt special because, you had the Plumlees who most people didn't like. And then you had my boy Nolan Smith. It wasn't your typical Duke team that wins championships. So it was a real special, close-knit team. So that was one of my favorite teams. And one of my favorite Duke players. I have to go with it. I'm sorry. I don't want to be, a homer, but it's JJ Reddick. I love me some JJ Reddick. I know most people would go with Zion and the new class, but there was some about JJ. And when I was in college, a lot of people gave JJ flack early. They was like, he's soft, he's this. But by his senior year, even some of my North Carolina friends would say, you know what? I kind of mess with JJ. So that was one of my favorite
He was
Duke
cold
players. So.
And also
cold.
And also, like, it was a lot of, like, fun from a perspective of watching, like, elite off-ball movement and, like, shooting to, like, watch him play. Because Reggie Miller was like that in the 90s in the NBA. Like, he's just running around picks, setting his feet and firing. JJ was so good at that, and I really liked watching that and kind of emulating it.
Yeah, the one last thing I'll say about JJ was, even though he didn't have handles, I remember the crossover he hit in the Carolina game, so...
I mean, I've said it for years about JJ. I think there should be a documentary, a 30 for 30 on his college career, because no player in college to this day, in my opinion, faced what he faced in opposing gyms. I mean, I've heard interviews with him before where he said, he would change his number multiple times a month because people would get it. He'd be warming up for games and they'd be yelling his sister's phone number at him, his mom's phone number. Like he said, he can't repeat some of the stuff people were saying to him in game. And he would go out there, drop 30 on you, hit dagger threes, and then tell you about it. Like he was a different, a different white boy for Duke. And I really like that about him. I hated him when we played him, but he was so good, man. He was the man for sure.
They took it when he played Maryland. They took it too personal because they talked about the sickness his sister had. So people
took it way too far.
That was a little bit too far. Yeah.
So okay,
go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead. Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
So that's your favorite player, JJ. Your favorite team was the championship team, and man, did I hate that team. John Shire, the Plumleys.
Yes.
Zubek, I couldn't stand Zubek's big goofy butt. So in that same vein, though, the year before, that's my favorite team, the Hansbrough senior year team with Danny Green and Ty Lawson, Wayne Ellington, Deion Thompson. I mean, that's a team that ran through March Madness and didn't have anything but a double-digit win every time out. I mean, that was, to me, the best team I've ever seen Carolina have, and my favorite. Favorite player-wise, it's a little weird. Most people find it weird when I say it. Rashad McCants.
Yeah.
Rashad McCants was my guy. I would say between him and Antoine Jameson was too, but Rashad McCants, for whatever reason, I love that dude from the time he stepped foot on campus his freshman year. So that would be mine. Mitch, what about you, buddy? And Joe Forte, any call on a team?
So I always liked North Carolina since I was like 5 or 6. Like when I first found out that's where Michael Jordan went. That's what was kind of the thing. So, but I really didn't get in and start following them until I was around 12, and that was right around the Billy Guthridge, Joe Forte era. So that was just that's where it kind of all hit. And my aunt actually took us on a trip down to Chapel Hill during that time. So I was right there in it, right in the Joe Forte time. So I think that's kind of why I latched to it, is I got to that age where I could actually watch games, understand what was going on. And so from there, but I think he's always just been my favorite player. And, Steele, I showed you my original Joe Forte jersey, which I don't wear anymore because it's too valuable to me. But I think my favorite era of teams it was probably right through college with Ty Hansbrough, and Danny Green, and I really liked Ty Lawson and how he was just a 5'11", 6 foot, just stud and not afraid to go in. And just ran the game, and so I'm hoping that even an RJ Davis is going to kind of turn into, I would love to see RJ Davis come back next year as a sophomore and kind of like Ty Lawson did, hit the weight room and get thick and because he's not afraid to go amongst the trees. And so I think that just that era. And then, like I said, I was in college and they won a national championship that year, in there. And I think that was just a fun team to watch. And then, now that, I have my daughter is now saying go Tar Heels. So this era is pretty fun to watch too, because I'm, training my next gen here. So
No, can I just say, so growing up and not really feeling like I had one of the two as my team. The team that I remember seeing and really thinking was cool was Ed Cota, Antoine Jameson, and then Vince Carter from UNC. But then a few years later, when I think we were getting right through high school, when Duke had, was it Battier, J. Will,
Dunleavy, Boozer,
and Boozer,
Carrawell,
all future,
Chris
but
Duhon.
So they had 5 guys, and Carrawell wasn't one of them. Duhon was coming off the bench. They were future NBA players, and a couple of them looked like they're going to be superstar NBA players.
Yep.
I mean, they didn't quite turn out like that, but Boozer was still ended up having a really good career. J. Will may have if he didn't get hurt. Even Dunleavy had a good couple years in the NBA. And of course, we know what Battier had a long career. That was a really cool team because it was like the script got slightly flipped. Because I think a few years prior, it seemed like even though they were equal in college, North Carolina had all the NBA guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And Duke just had these guys that are good college players.
Good 4-year players.
Mhm.
Right. It started to seem like it got flipped a little bit when Duke seemed just absolutely loaded with future NBA talent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, running joke in our high school was before 2000, you had to name the amount of Duke players versus the amount of Carolina players in the NBA. And let's just say that Duke list was pretty short. So
Even the Dynasty Duke, right? Even the Dynasty Duke team, like Leitner made it. Hurley got hurt or something relatively early in his NBA career, so he never really took off. And then of course Grant Hill had a great career until he had his injury.
But you could name Rasheed Wallace. You can go all the way down.
A lot of them.
You had about two or three every year that you knew were going to be. So we talked about eras, and I kind of, this is an interesting thing to me. Let's get into some of these eras of this rivalry, because there are stretches, 3 or 4 year stretches where maybe Duke or Carolina kind of runs the other one. So to me, there's a few great eras where it was just every contest for years was so
Actually,
close.
hold up.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. I want to apologize. We had some technical difficulties there. And before we ended up having to pause real quick, Steele, you were talking about different eras in North Carolina and Duke rivalry basketball. Go.
Yeah. So, I mean, for a person my age, in my younger 30s, really this rivalry started for me in the mid-90s. So from mid-90s now into 2021, I think there was a few, almost golden eras of this rivalry. Starting with like the 97 and 98 seasons, a lot of parity between the two. You had a young Antoine Jamison, Vince Carter, Ed Cota team for Carolina, and you had a Jeff Capel. He was more of a senior leader with Trajan Langdon and some other guys for Duke. Those games, all four of those in that 2 year span, were give and go. I mean, back and forth. They split both years. Carolina would get out to a lead. Duke would sprint back and win. It was a great rivalry right there. Mm-hmm. Then you fast forward, Duke kind of runs the show for a while. They bring in Shane Battier and, Jay Will and all these guys, and they beat up on some lesser talented Carolina teams for a while. But then we fast forward into like 2004, 2005 seasons. Carolina is replenished with May, McCants, and Felton, Jawad Williams. Duke has stayed a power the whole time, and really they're a favorite with J.J. Reddick in a team led by Chris Duhon, who's now a senior, and they're excellent. I mean, that was probably one of the best Duke teams, and a guy that, you're going to know it, Tim, Daniel Ewing, was a monster. I mean, people won't even know who that is. In college terms, he was phenomenal. I mean,
he was the beast.
Combo guard, could shoot it, could drive it, could defend. I mean, he was elite as a college player. But the 04 and 05 seasons now, again, you split. Duhon has a game-winning reverse layup in overtime. And then my next era would be because then, Hansbrough comes in. They kind of run Duke 6-2 over that stretch. And then you get in some back and forth once we get like Harrison Barnes and Zeller and Henson. And Duke has the Plumlee brothers who seem to be there forever.
They never left. I think they're still there.
And some of those teams, Austin Rivers and even Seth Curry transferring over. To me, those are the three best years. I just say, do you guys want to speak on any of those years, any games that stuck out, best games throughout those eras?
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. Thank you for that. I almost forgot about Daniel Ewing.
He was a monster, man.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he won ACC Player of the Tournament one year because he had a really good ACC tournament. I could be wrong, but yeah.
He was one of those guys that I felt like, when is he going to graduate? He's here every single year. Why?
He was tough.
Yeah, I think, though, I know you guys are going to like, I did like the Plumlee era because they're one of the few threesome brothers that can all say they won a national championship. So one can't get it over the other. Yeah, I like that because too, I don't like dominance either way, either Duke's way or Carolina's way. Now I don't like it when we lose, But I do like the competitiveness where the games are close, where you don't know who's going to win, where, Duke could win or Carolina could win or something. So I think the Plumlee era was one of my more favorite eras because it did go back and forth. And, you guys had some big guys that gave us all we wanted to handle and, vice versa. So it was
and I think that's part of what I talked about last week. One of the defining features of a rivalry is that both teams have a realistic shot of winning or did win in big moments. And I think what has given Duke and North Carolina staying power is that, and they go through eras like you just said, but for the most part, they're both right there each year and really good and able to beat each other any given game. It is interesting though, like when you even talk about the brief period of time that wasn't the case, when North Carolina kind of went through a short period of time between the really good teams, and almost Duke and Maryland. I remember briefly when we were in, I think, high school, early 2000s, became a big rivalry before they fell, because Maryland was like a national championship level team for a while, and then they fell off again and became
that was that in between time where Carolina was bad for.
Who was that?
And Maryland, Juan Dixon and Lonnie Baxter,
Steve Blake.
Yeah, Steve Blake will give you the hand.
Wait. My favorite player from that team was Chris Wilcox.
Oh,
he was an animal.
This is why I wanted to bring that up. Did low key as North Carolina fans, did you become like undercover Maryland fans during the bad years?
Maryland all day. Oh, you have no idea, man. Oh.
Well, can I give y'all some perspective from being around the Duke fans and the campuses?
Yes.
At no point did any Duke fan consider Maryland a rivalry.
Right.
I
believe that. I believe it.
At on TV they tried to hype it up, but if you went by the campuses, they wanted. As a matter of fact, one of the last times we played them, the joke was not our rivals.
Yeah,
because Maryland probably wanted so bad to be their rival, but we're not.
And here's my thought on that, Tim, is the fact that you look at last year's team was the worst North Carolina team since 2000, 2001, somewhere. It's definitely the worst in the Roy Williams era. And yet every time they played last year, it was still a game, or at least, Duke, who was by far the better team. North Carolina still gave them a run for their money and made it interesting. So it's still a rivalry. Now,
and that's what history does for you, is it allows it to prolong. And interestingly, even on the Maryland and Duke point, you see that in other, contexts too. I think of college football, where Penn State fans a lot of times look at Ohio State as a rival, but they just look at Michigan as their rival, even though Penn State wants them to be their rival.
Right.
Or, and then the other way with Penn State is they don't consider Pitt their rival, even though Pitt fans consider Penn State fans their biggest rival ever. Penn State fans don't care about them. So it's just like interesting how you see that sometimes.
Because I even watched a documentary, and they tried the 2001, 2002 when Duke and Maryland both won a championship. You can't build a rivalry off 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you're only going to go about 2 years was exciting, but the rest of the time it wasn't, then no, that's not definition. Going back to Ben's definition of what a true rivalry is. So.
Yeah. Which was a great definition. If you didn't see that, go back to last week's episode and check out his definition, because that was pretty good. So let's.
But like that brings up the question. Oh, sorry.
Go for it. I want to hear what you.
That brings up the question though, is like who or what was your favorite games? Like what were your favorite games ever? Most memorable games ever between these two teams?
One of you guys can start with this one, because I could go on for days and days.
So most memorable, like I said, the 98 season, because that was my first love, my first Carolina love that I fell in love team with was, we get up huge on Duke. I mean, we're strutting. Vince Carter's getting alley-oops from half court, and we're about to run away with this. And all of a sudden, Wojo starts being Wojo, and Elton Brand starts hitting shots. And now this game's getting tight. And we eventually spaced it out and won. But I think that year was awesome. We did that again, and Duke came back and beat us that time. That was probably my favorite year. Most memorable game, and it hurts me to say it, I still have not gotten over this. The Austin Rivers shot. I mean, that game was, if you looked at win probability, Tyler Zeller tips in. People forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
He tips in an air ball 3 that counts for 3 for Duke. If he just grabs that ball, there's never even a chance for an Austin Rivers, game winner. So that one, I mean, my phone was blowing up.
Man down.
I turned it off. So that one from a pain standpoint is my most memorable. But really, that Hansbrough 4 years when he got his nose bloodied and we beat, I mean, that was memorable 4 years. We just didn't do that. We didn't go into Duke year after year and win there. And that was cool for me.
I think my most memorable one would have to be, I have a tie for 2. It would have to be the Zion Williams ACC semifinal game. And
awesome.
it's memorable for off the court.
That was a great game.
I have 2 kids, 11 and 8, and my 11-year-old never watched sports. But for some reason, him and my 8-year-old got on this Zion Williamson roller coaster, and we watched every single game together. And to see that game where we sat down and we was cheering and we was together, it was a touching moment as a father to see that. That was actually my oldest first time he watched Duke win, and my youngest third time he watched. And the second game would have to be the Trey Jones from 2 years ago, because that's just me and that was just a father-son bonding moment where we got to hug each other and we got to cheer and all that. And those were my 2. The most painful one has to be, without a question, senior night for JJ Reddick.
Yeah.
Tyler Hansbrough goes in there.
Yep.
We was on Duke campus. We was on Duke campus watching the game, and one of my friends was a Carolina fan. He was trying to be quiet, and I was just telling him we're going to get the parade out. This is going to be a blowout. We're going to get them. And Tyler Hansbrough, he made that crazy little cheese smile that I couldn't stand. So that one really hurt me. That one hurt my pride.
I have to go with an era on this one. More and I can't even give you the actual stats of who won more games. But so growing up, the funny thing is I was a huge Tar Heels fan, but my brother was actually a big Duke fan. And it got so bad that my mother, bless her, actually banned us from watching the games together because it usually ended poorly. So I had to watch it in one room. My brother had to watch it in another room. But, I'm sure my mom can back this up, is that my brother and I were still screaming back and forth through the house at each other, So I just think, and those were like our high school into college, junior high into college. He's 3 years older than I am. So I think just that, right around the McCants and Felton and, JJ Reddicks and Sheldon Williams here, right in that, man, that was just a lot of fun basketball to watch. I can't remember the exact year on it, but that one where Jawad Williams hit that 3 close to the end of the game. Steele, can you remember what year that is?
That was 04.
04. And
he sent it to overtime, I'm pretty sure. And then in overtime, McCants hit a 3 with 9 seconds left to tie it. Duke inbounds it. Duhon goes down, reverse layup to win it.
Okay, there it is.
It was
I just remember when Williams banged that 3. Okay?
Oh.
I was upstairs in my parents' room watching it, and I remember going to the top of the stairs and just screaming down the stairs. And I see my brother's head poke up, looking up the stairs at me, jawing back at me. So I think that's what makes it better, is that just that stuff that, my brother and I used to go back and forth on, and it's just a great rivalry, and then you hear people say it's the greatest rivalry in sports. I think it really is. So.
How about, does anybody have a favorite play or a favorite moment from the rivalry? Or favorite plays, plural? Does anybody have any memorable moments they remember? I have 2 big ones.
All right. Who wants to take this one first? If you're ready, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. I have the dunk that kind of, I've never dunked a basketball on a 10-foot hoop, but it made me want to, was Stackhouse's reverse and one dunk in 95.
Yeah.
That was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And then the other one was Danny Green dunked on Greg Paulus, crotch in his face at Duke.
Yeah,
and
that
Greg
was
Paulus
a good one.
One of those annoying Duke players. And it was just it was awesome. Those are my 2 memorable ones.
I think one of my memorable ones was 2016 with Grayson Allen. And if you don't remember the road game of that, because Jay Billis, he wore out the saying, this reminds me of 2012 with Austin Rivers, but he kept saying, Emil Jefferson got hurt before the game, so he couldn't play. And they was only playing 6 guys. Then Matt Jones get hurt during the game. So in the second half, they're playing 5 guys only, and they went to a spread offense. And, I know everybody hates Grayson Allen and all the antics and all that, but I love the way they scrapped down and they just stole the game that they shouldn't have won.
Oh, he didn't miss. It was ridiculous.
Him and Brandon Ingram,
that's who it was. I couldn't remember who the other guy was. Somebody else wouldn't miss that game.
Yeah, him and Brandon Ingram, they just played an NBA type offense where Coach K gave them the ball, and whoever had the worst matchup, they just scored. So that to me, that to me was memorable. And then I'm gonna go with the Zion Williamson dunk when he was in the game. So those were 2 for me. I'm not gonna go with the shoe though, because I don't want to pour salt on that.
I really felt bad for him that game and going down, and I still have to say it. If he's healthy and played those 2, North Carolina, I don't think sweeps them during the regular season there. Mine's not a play, but mine's a moment. Well, I guess it came from a play, but the bloody Ty Hansborough when he caught the elbow from Henderson. I love that. Like when that face he made, and he's staring him down and he's
getting up like he's ready to fight and everything.
Like Psycho T, that was like Psycho T at his peak right there. So I just love that. I love that moment, in the rivalry. It's pretty cool.
I was gonna say, and I might get the details of this wrong because we were pretty young, but the game where it just kept going into more and more overtimes, and there was like a half-court shot by, I think it was Chris Caraway or somebody. I can't remember.
Jeff Capel.
Capel, that's right. It was Jeff Capel, way back in the day, and it just kept on like back and forth, like that as an introduction to what a rivalry game's supposed to feel like.
Yeah,
and kind of like what I remember.
And Duke wasn't ranked during that game.
They were terrible. They were 0-7 at that point in the ACC.
Yeah, and North Carolina was 7-1.
Because Coach K was out with back problems.
That's right. Yeah.
You know what's funny? They show that play like we won the game. You ever notice
that?
Right. They never show the final score, but when
I was growing up, I thought we lost that game. They show that play so much.
Every time you see it, it's that play going off, and you're thinking, "Wow, Duke won that game." No, we lost.
But it's funny how stuff like that happens. And I was going to ask this earlier when you guys were describing some of your favorite moments. Sometimes in a true rivalry, I mean, winning always matters, but it's the moments that you feel during it that matter almost as much. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of times it's like, why do you remember, or why is that your favorite era? It has to do with like what Mitch is saying. Like it's going back and forth with my brother as we're growing up.
Yeah.
Right. It's like what Tim was saying, like now introducing my kids to it, my sons to the same rivalry. Right. And so it's kind of interesting. And we've talked about Steele, and I know we've talked about this before too. What becomes your favorite era, or your favorite player, your favorite team, and why? A lot of it has to do with like what you grew up with and like what you associate that with. And for me, and it's a cross sports comparison, but when I think of like watching the Steelers, I think of my grandparents' house because that's where I watched every game growing up. And I think of like that relationship we had of like rooting for the team together. And that's what I think of and why it's like important to me, even though it doesn't seem like it should matter. So like, it's funny how like, even with this, it's the other stuff around it almost. Like for me, I remember the Jeff Capel half court shot, even though I didn't remember which player it was, because I just remember it being like, oh, this is what's crazy. This is what makes college basketball special. This is what makes like this rivalry special, is that you don't know what's going to happen.
And you're gonna forget the names of the players and the play and all that, but you're not gonna forget the moment you say you spent with your brother, or I spent with my kids. You're not gonna forget that. And back to the old cliche, you remember where you were when this happened.
And how it made you feel, right? Like to me, I just remember the excitement of this game's gonna keep going forever, like and then that kind of thing, right?
So bringing up Jeff Capel and talking about sibling rivalry and stuff. A lot of people probably don't know this, but Jeff Capel's younger brother Jason actually played for North Carolina. So if you think that my brother and me's house is bad, living in Northwest Pennsylvania compared to those guys who are, which now they're Jason's actually on Jeff's coaching staff at Pitt. And so I just think that's pretty cool. But Hey, I think this is a great place to take a break, and then we are going to come back, and it's All-Star. It's coming up on the All-Star NBA. Tim, you want to stick around? I don't want to put pressure on you. You want to stick around, talk some All-Star with us? All right, that's what I'm talking about.
I love the NBA, so let's go.
So we'll be back with some talk about the NBA All-Star. This is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Host Mitch Shreve, along with my two gurus, Ben Sperry and Ryan Steele, and we are joined by. I'm gonna go ahead and say it, Tim, just because I'm the one with the mic right now. But the number one Give and Go Basketball Podcast fan, Tim Peoples.
I appreciate that.
Even though you're a Duke fan, I still like you.
Say friend of the show.
Friend of the show. It's true.
There we go.
We can go ahead and say that now. Something I thought about too is we're going to have to think of like what to call the fans of the show. Every good podcast out there has like a name for their fans. We're going to have to think about that. Anyways, All-Star weekend coming up here. We're talking just all things NBA All-Star game. Ben, go ahead and start this off for me.
Well, so I guess I wanted to start with because sometimes it's not even necessarily the games themselves of the excitement of the weekend. It's the dunk contest, the three-point shootout, maybe the rookie game even. That's really the thing that brings a lot of attention. Hell, even the celebrity game sometimes brings more attention than even the All-Star game gets. And we might talk briefly about our favorite All-Star games of the past, but what I wanted to open with is what's the most memorable dunk contest or three-point shootout you remember watching?
I'll take it first. The dunk contest to me is clear. 2000 dunk contest with Vince Carter.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
I mean that I like how we just said in the last segment. Remember where you were? I know where I was. We didn't take our eyes off the TV. You didn't go to the room to get a drink. I mean, you were glued.
So, and what I wanted to say about the dunk contest, and that's a perfect lead up for that one, is you go back in time, like if you can watch the old dunks, sometimes you watch them, you're like, well, that's not as impressive as stuff that you see now. But then you got to remember what we felt in the moment. And in the moment of those dunks, to watch like Vince Carter do a reverse 360 and then into the windmill, or really all of his dunks, you just got so hyped because you didn't know what was going to come, but you knew it was going to be awesome. Mm-hmm. That's the moment.
Didn't miss.
It was always the first try.
Yeah, it was first try. It was.
Yeah,
and you forget that there was even other people in the contest with him. So,
and also you forget how good some of their dunks were. If you watch that contest, Steve Francis is like throwing the ball up and then grabbing it, pinning it off his toe, and then bamming it. And Tracy McGrady had great dunks. Those are the other two guys in there. Yep. And I remember that year they had a vertical tracker that they used whenever they jumped. So like when they did the replay, be like, you got 42 inches off the ground. And I just remember Steve Francis was consistently getting a little bit higher than those guys, but it makes sense because he was a shorter guy, and just throwing down incredible dunks. You can't say that those guys got ripped off, T-Mac and Steve Francis, because Vince Carter's dunks were just like revolutionary.
Yeah, it wasn't even close, but still. But I think when we go to you said memorable. I think 2015 with Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon. Because I'm not a fan either way, but I do think Aaron Gordon got robbed. But back to your point,
multiple times.
Back to your point when you said the first try, when they went into overtime dunks, they were making all their dunks on the first try. Yeah. So I mean that's a tough thing to do because normally you see like 20 attempts, 15 attempts or something. So to make it on the first try.
Birdman.
One of the 3 years that Nate Robinson won because Nate Robinson won a whole bunch of times.
He took like an hour.
Won, he had like 72 tries or something to get a dunk down. And granted, if you pretended that was his first try on it, then it was a great dunk. But he took so many chances. It was like,
Yeah, but that year they, I think they didn't let him have a shot clock or something, or they didn't because he kept going and kept going, and I was like, man, are we gonna end this or anything? But
maybe it was a shot clock, but like you got unlimited tries within the time period.
I think that's what it was. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
But do you think that Aaron Gordon got robbed against Zach LaVine or against Derek White?
I think he got you could argue he got robbed in multiple times, but at the same time, those other guys were also amazing. So like you can't really take anything away from the guy that beat him. And like this is a tough thing about saying getting robbed, because that means you robbed somebody, and it's hard to say that. So like, kind of like we were saying with All-Stars when we did the CJ McCollum All-Stars thing. You can say a guy has been snubbed, right? But that means you actually have to take somebody that got picked off to put him on.
Yeah.
And that's a lot harder to do than it really sometimes is.
Well, the only reason I bring it up, Ben, not to cut you off, the only reason I bring it up, Scottie Pippen was on the next day, and he said Dwayne Wade went off script in that because they had agreed that they was going to. There you go. Sir. They had agreed that they were going to make them joint champions and that everybody was going to vote the same. But Dwayne Wade went off script and threw everybody off. So that's the only reason I said.
Tim is right. Yeah, Eric Jones Jr. was a Heat player, and he was there. You go. What? That's my guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna break script because we all agree we're gonna give him the same. But I'm gonna go this way. So.
Yeah,
he's right. He's right.
Yeah.
My favorite, I have to, and I wasn't around for this one because I wasn't even born yet. But anyways, I got to give anybody who's under 5'8" appreciates this one, and that's Spud Webb, man. And I love watching that. Like you can find it on YouTube. I love watching that because like I remember seeing that as a kid and being like, oh, there's hope for me, and then the hope diminished. But but I loved watching his because he could fly. But I love the I think my all-time favorite though was Blake Griffin taking a ball from Baron Davis out the car and putting it down. I love that one. That's showmanship right there.
But I think you the ones he did where he said no props or anything, those was really good dunks too. His first two dunks, those are really good. So.
Moving on here a little bit, and I'm going to start this one off. What are some of your? Oh, I guess we got to go to 3-point shootouts. Let's talk about some 3-point shootouts first. Does anybody have any memorable 3-point shootouts?
Now, I probably wasn't even thought about or anywhere, but the whole Larry Bird myth, the way he walked in and said who's going to finish second. I mean. Can you top that?
I was wondering who was going to bring him up first. Tim, you win.
And then the video of it, he shoots the last one. He just starts walking away.
He didn't take his warm-up off. He let the warm-up off.
Well, and if you rewatch it, he actually misses like the first 2 racks. So it's like he almost knows how many he has to hit, and he gets hot late, hits like the last entire rack, and just walks away because he knows he won. Like that was cold-blooded because he's a cold-blooded dude.
Yeah, that's the only one that I really thought of as memorable for me.
That was great.
You come to more recent times, like there's been years where there's like just guys that do incredible shooting feats, but for some reason it's not the level of excitement of the 3-point shootout and dunk contest. Now, I'm just going to throw a silly one out there for a second. A couple of years, I don't even remember what year it was, but the year that Arnie Duncan, which is the education secretary, played in the celebrity game and actually like reminded people that he was a college basketball player because he was actually really, really good was like enlightening for me. Like I was just like, that's interesting. Like this guy actually can play.
But what's sad though? He didn't even win All-Star MVP for that.
They gave it to Kevin Hart. Yeah. That's
and he had like 2 points, but Arnie Duncan was really good in those.
He was really good. Like he threw like no look behind the back passes. Like he got whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. It was actually pretty impressive.
I do enjoy watching the celebrity games though, because you don't realize that a lot of them actually have some decent skill and can actually play. But so what are some favorite All-Star games of the past? And I'm gonna just take this off by I have to admit it. I'm gonna raise my hand here. I do not like watching All-Star games, and Ben and Ryan probably know this one. I'm a defensive guy, and there is no defense in the All-Star games, and I don't get into it.
Now, I agree with that. But to me, the best, and to me, it's clear as day, just like the dunk contest for me, was the 2001 All-Star game. They did play defense. If you watch that, I've probably watched that game 10 times throughout my life.
That was with the huge comeback behind
led by AI and Marbury of all people, and Vince to some extent. But that was a matchup of a guard-oriented team in the East versus the West, who were just KG, C-Web,
Duncan, Shaq,
all these bigs, and then obviously Kobe and stuff, and J Kidd. But the comeback was awesome, and they played the opening possession was a block on both ends. Kobe tried to fade away on T-Mac, and T-Mac swatted out of bounds. So, like, they played from the jump on that game. It was fun to watch.
And you know what's crazy about that is they almost accidentally figured out the future of basketball to some extent. They just wanted a bunch of smaller, more skilled players and
ran around
and
shot, spacing
like
the floor and all that.
So you know, it wasn't quite like modern basketball because like AI nor Steph were really that great of outside shooters,
Right.
but like it was more similar to what you would start to see in following years.
I think my best memory, I mean, I know you guys are saying home, but T-Max off the backboard in 2002.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
That took me out of my seat because he came out and just threw it off the back, and you know he became a starter after doing those dunks. So,
oh my gosh, he was so good.
That was really good. When he threw it off the back, and then he hit another one, and then he was a starter from then. So, because I'm a huge T-Mac fan, went to North Carolina high school for 1 year or so. I'm gonna claim him as a North Carolinian.
now the other one I'd say was really good was the 03 one. This is Jordan's last All-Star game.
Yep.
And he hits the memorable MJ
should have been the game
turn
winner
around
to basically win the game with whatever a few seconds left. And Jermaine O'Neal forgets how to play basketball for a minute and just fouls with like 5 seconds left, and they tie it up to go to another over. It was just it made no sense. But
what was odd about that game, though, was that, they would have gave the MVP to Jordan, but my boy T-Mac had the most points in that game,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I think another probably not so – it stopped getting fun, and going back to your point, Mitch, is that when they start trying to get the hometown guy to win MVP and they just throwing up a bunch of lobs and all that. I do think with the new updated play to a score – I think that could help out in the defensive area. Yeah. So
I think it's called ELO ending or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they did it in some sort of tournament.
It's been bad for a while. I have to agree with Mitch. Since, probably 2013, 14 on, they've been tough to watch.
Well, and so, yes, and I think a lot of us agree with this, that the All-Star game isn't often the highlight of the weekend because it's just not great. And they're trying to make a change by this format. Now, one other idea that I want to propose and talk about a little bit is, what if we just flipped the format altogether? Instead of doing East versus West or even whatever the players pick out of the already selected All-Stars, we did US versus the world. So, like, what maybe we can talk about a little bit is, like, who would win even with US versus the world right now?
They do that with Rising Stars, and I think I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
That and I'm just going to throw this little dart here on this one, is that I think they could also take a little page from Major League Baseball, and with Major League Baseball, the All-Star game counts. The winner of the All-Star game, National League, American League, wins home field advantage for the World Series. So you see a lot of the bigger stars on the bigger teams, like the teams that like let's say the Dodgers, for example, who are pretty much guaranteed to make it to the World Series. They those guys want to play in it because they know that if they win, they get, home field advantage for the World Series. So I think that's an interesting thought, but I like the world versus USA a little bit better. But go on. I just want.
I like it from both. There. Yeah, I mean, and that's smart. Like, and maybe that'll make the players care more and be more competitive. But what I kind of like about this is, from a fan's perspective, it gives you a rooting interest. It's kind of interesting, and it also highlights the global nature of the game. And in years past, like, even though the game's gotten increasingly global, you would say that all the best players are still American. But if you look across the board now, of the top 10 players in the NBA, maybe half of them aren't American. Right? Like,
right.
At least. I don't even know. Because, like, if you look at it right now, the top 2 centers are Embiid and Jokic, right? The guy that's won the last 2 MVPs and last year's Defensive Player of the Year as well, Giannis. You got the next great superstar, or at least what it looks like, in Luka Doncic. These guys are all world players, and I think would make actually a tough lineup or a tough matchup for a U.S. versus World All-Star game.
And I think, Ben, you brought it up earlier too when we were talking off. it also helps you realize some guys you thought were American aren't actually American. So you start to learn about certain guys and where they're from, and because you used the example of Cat, Carl Anthony Towns, where we were like, is he really from here or not? So it would get you that rooted interest where you're like, wait a minute, I thought he was American. He played for that team. Yeah. So it would make for an interesting conversation. And I do think it saved the Rising Stars game because rookies versus sophomores just got out of hand. And it was not a good watch either. So I think that's made that a little bit more competitive and fun to watch.
Right.
So.
And in a year like this where they cancel a lot of All-Star Weekend, obviously, with COVID and everything, and granted, it might change back again in a year when this is all gone, but I feel like this could have been a year they did that, because even among the selected All-Stars, there are so many would-be world players among them that you could almost do it.
Now, I think the only thing the NBA, because I also love that idea as far as good basketball to watch, and especially I think it hurts that it's in the middle of an NBA season because the players are never going to go fully, as hard as they would otherwise. But it kind of takes out the fan voting to some extent, which I'm fine with. But I know the NBA kind of loves to have that fan, interaction there, because the fans are never going to vote. Like we talked about, the world is going to have about 7 big men, and they're never going to vote all these big men. You know what I mean? So.
Well, yes and no, right? Because the world vote is also mattering a lot more. Like Luka was one of the top vote getters, and I think that's in part driven by the international vote, not just local. And remember, Yao Ming wanted to vote every year.
I was just about to say that.
That wasn't just Americans on that one.
He was even voted when he was injured. He was voted as a starter when he was injured.
Right. So but here's the thing. And now if we actually talked about like who would win, the world team actually has all the good bigs, aside from Anthony Davis, who's actually currently hurt, and Karl Anthony Towns, because he is technically American, even though he also could play for the Dominican team. There really aren't a lot of American bigs that are among the most dominant in the league right now. It's almost all foreign players.
But here's where America has a little bit of advantage. You got guys like KD who are 7 foot tall.
Yep.
And now if he plays the 4, who's guarding him? Yep. LeBron 6'9", 6'10", who's guarding him? So America has some length that, is more wing oriented, and the world team has length that's more paint, oriented.
And what's crazy is it actually shows like the weird way the game's evolved is that the U.S. team would be spreading you out, playing small and shooting threes,
the European style,
and the world team would just try to beat the crap out of you, right? Because they have literally the two most dominant bigs in the league right now are Jokic and Embiid, and arguably they're having the 2 best seasons in the league right now. Can you play both of them together in this hypothetical matchup against the U.S. team when neither one can guard a KD or a LeBron or whatever?
And does the world have enough shooting?
Right. And I mean, they do don't get me wrong, like those 2 guys can even shoot threes, but it becomes an interesting matchup because where do you do with a Ben Simmons or a Giannis on this team? Can they play together?
Yeah. Like, and to me, the world's best shooters are guys who aren't all-stars, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Your Bogdanoviches, your guys like that who aren't all-stars, but they can shoot it, So.
Yeah.
Even a Jamal, even like a Jamal Murray, right? Like he didn't make the all-star game, but he's an elite shot maker. Would be a good fit here. Yeah.
Right.
I think where the U.S. would have the best advantage would probably be the second unit with the bench, guys coming off the bench. And they have a lot of guys who can do like the dirty work. Like you got a Jimmy Butler who can play defense. And, you have guys who could do multiple things.
Yes.
So I think their best shot would be get them to the bench and then get up a big lead and let your starters bring them home. So.
Right. They would probably actually want to like press and run all over the place because they have such a big advantage on wings and guards. And I mean, it's not that there's no good wings / guards for the European team. It's just they're different, right? They're like you're either playing point center with like a Giannis or you play with an oversized guard like Luka, right?
Yeah.
Because technically, unless you start including guys like Jamal Murray and Bojan Bogdanovic and all these guys as all-stars, you don't really have traditional guards.
Yeah, and then with the James Harden and the dribble moves and the Kyrie Irving, I mean, it's going to be a nightmare to guard those type of guys. Steph Curry and Dame Lillard. And so it would be a better matchup. I think it would be better than the former Av. So that'd be a great idea. Why don't you write Adam Silver on that, Ben?
Right? Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting just because like it'd be a true clash of styles. Like if the world could just make it into somehow like a slow it down and bang inside game. Or maybe even you just adjust the rules a little bit. You make it more like FIBA style, where it's actually has like a little bit more hand checking, a little bit more grabbing and pushing. Now you tilt the favor a little bit in favor of all those bigs. I don't know.
Well, before we end today's show or this week's show, we do have one minor correction that we do have to make regarding the CJ McCollum All-Stars from our previous episode. Ben, go ahead and take it. Talk about our boy Mike Conley for a minute. It
was announced today as an injury replacement. Mike Conley has now been selected to the All-Star game, which means that he is no longer fits the criteria of a CJ McCollum All-Star, which means he never had been selected for an All-Star game. And honestly, CJ McCollum probably would have been this year had he not gotten hurt, because he was balling. Stats. Yeah. But for now, that remains the name of the team, CJ McCollum All-Stars, and we have one less member. So I guess we got to pour out one for our now dead homie.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks again for joining us on the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Tim, thank you so much for being with us today. That was
thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, such a great Duke, and I enjoy reading your comments every week. Like that's what I'm looking for. Like I can't remember what I think it was our third week, or maybe it was the 7th week we did this. I was like, oh well, I was like jawing at you from the camera here. All right, let's do the final thoughts here before we go ahead and end it. Tim, any final thoughts you want to throw out at us?
Not really. I just really want to thank you guys for having me. This is my first time doing a podcast, so I just want to thank you guys for having me. And any final thoughts? Congratulations to you guys. You swept us this year. Hopefully you guys can have me back when we actually win a game. But yeah,
we can hook that up. Steele, your final thoughts?
Yeah, just another fun show. Thanks for Tim coming on, doing this with us. All-Star Weekend is upon us. To me, I know that you guys, it's always like a holiday for me. So yeah, I'm just pumped. Basketball all the time.
Ben, final thoughts?
You know what? I think Mike Conley was my final thought, I guess. So I'll just leave it there.
I can love that. Well, hey, as always, if you like what you're hearing, please click that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And hey, as always, this is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.